Imagine you are in a dark cave. You were out this morning hunting, looking for some big game. And this afternoon you were out picking berries. But now night has fallen. You are in a dark cave. The night is long and cold, and the beasts outside are wild and treacherous. A flash of light! Suddenly, the fire is lit in the cave, and you see upon the cave wall an image of a bull twisting, horns pointed down as it charges toward another animal. You see across the wall in front of you a spotted horse. As the light from the fire flickers and the flames rise higher and higher, it's almost as if you're watching an ancient film. The images flash across the wall as the storyteller recounts great tales of the hunt. You find yourself in Lascaux Cave. I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Debin, and I'm an art historian, and this is Art Trippin Lecture Series.
Hi, I'm Dr. Megan Lorraine Debin, and this is Art Trippin.
This cave is located in the Pyrenees Mountains in France from 14,000 BCE, also known as a long-ass time ago. Lascaux is one of the most famous caves that feature ancient prehistoric cave paintings. Nearby in Spain is another cave. This is in northern Spain in Altamira. The paintings are dated to 12,000 BCE. The Altamira caves were discovered by a boy with his dog in 1879, and the Lascaux caves were discovered by some teenagers who were out in the woods doing what teenagers do in the woods, and they found this cave in 1940. What have we learned in the past century or so about ancient prehistoric cave paintings? What was their function? Why did prehistoric people paint these images up high on the walls and the ceilings of these caves? Stay tuned to find out more. The writing is on the wall. Prehistoric cave paintings and the first sculptures. Welcome to our first in this new series on ancient art history. Today we will be discussing art before written history. That's right, prehistoric art. In fact, the word prehistoric refers to the time period before written history. Before we dive into this topic, I want to define some key terms for this next series on ancient art. A term that you're going to hear is Paleolithic. The Paleolithic period refers to the Old Stone Age. Paleo is old and lithos is Greek for stone. When we're talking about the Paleolithic period, we're talking about a time period when humans were living mostly in a nomadic lifestyle. Now, this doesn't mean that people were constantly on the move every day, but more so that they lived in temporary structures and they moved as they followed the food generally. As this is a time period before agriculture, before humans settled down and practice agriculture and animal husbandry or the raising of animals. When we look at the Neolithic era, Neolithic refers to the New Stone Age. These words come from the Greek lithos, stone, and neo for new. When we're talking about the Neolithic period, this is the time period when humans have settled down. Humans have built the first permanent settlements, and we have the beginning of what we call monumental architecture, residences, temples, and other permanent structures. Composite view. When we're looking at an image front on, we call this a frontal view. When we're looking at something in a profile view, we see just one side of the image. What we will see in prehistoric art is a combination where we see a mix between frontal view and profile view, giving us composite view. We will also see relief sculptures. So these are sculptures that are carved from a flat surface. So you might see a wall with images incised or carved into it. This is a subtractive method of carving. Or you might see additive sculptures. So there might be a surface where clay or another material is added onto the surface to build up an image. We will also see in the prehistoric era, especially when we look at Neolithic architecture, the term post and lintel system. This refers to a very basic unit of construction. So some of the earliest buildings made by humans in the West employ this system of post and lintel, which refers to two vertical posts and a horizontal beam. This is a fundamental element of Neolithic architecture. So these key terms will help us understand art during the prehistoric era, which covers the Paleolithic, Old Stone Age, and Neolithic, New Stone Age periods. Now, the cave paintings in Lascaux that were discovered in 1940 are no longer open to the public because what do humans do? They go in the cave and they do this sort of annoying thing that humans have to do, which is breathing. And all of this breathing and lighting and people moving in and out of the cave has actually started to deteriorate these ancient paintings. So now when you go to Lascaux, you go to an interpretive center and you can see replicas of the original paintings. For our purposes, we can look at some really beautiful high resolution images of some of these paintings from the Lascaux caves. Have you been in a cave before? I've been in some caves in Mexico. Many times when you go into a cave, there's a really narrow passageway, and then you walk into this cave and it opens up into this huge hall, almost like a cathedral. And in the Lascaux Cave, we have this great big hall known as the Hall of the Bulls. And why is it called the Hall of the Bulls? Because all over the walls and ceilings of this room, we see paintings of animals, primarily bulls. So here we can see the bull's head is in composite view. What does that mean? Well, if you look at the bull's head, you can see the bull's head is depicted in profile, but the horns are depicted frontally. So here we see an example of composite view. Perhaps this was a way for ancient people to depict the animal so that we could get a really clear idea that this is very specifically a bull and not some other animal. Now, how do we know how old this stuff is? So obviously, this is the prehistoric era. This is the era before humans had writing that we know of in the Western world. So these objects do not have dates written down on them, nor is there any corroborating written evidence that we can look to. So how do we know that something comes from the Paleolithic or Neolithic period? Well, science has made it possible for us to determine the age of something through carbon-14 dating. But although this can help us identify a date or a rough era, there are many other context clues that we are going to look to understand what life was like for people at this time. So we will look at all of the material culture. What other objects were people making? What objects do we find in any burial sites, if any? What objects were the people wearing when they were buried? What objects were left there? So these other elements, the sort of culture around the site or the object, can help tell us more about what life was like for people in prehistoric Europe and the Near East. So when we're looking at Paleolithic art, we're roughly talking about the time period from 30,000 BCE to 9,000 BCE. This is the prehistoric Paleolithic era. Remember, the Neolithic era comes later. This is after we have a massive change in the Earth's climate. We have humans settling down, building permanent structures, practicing agriculture and animal husbandry. But in the Paleolithic era, we have people living mostly a nomadic lifestyle. In this class, we're going to cover generally the West, which refers to sort of Western Europe, Spain, France, Austria, Germany, etc. And we will also talk about parts of Africa, especially North Africa in this class. Now, what are we going to see when we look at objects from the Paleolithic era? We're going to see a variety of materials used for making objects, including stone, of course. We will see lots of carved stone. We will also see sculptures made of clay. We will also see objects made of shell, ivory, and other natural materials. When we're talking about the cave paintings, these are painted all with organic materials that Paleolithic people would have had to take time out of their day to go gather. There was no art supply warehouse. There was no Blix. You had to make your own art materials. In the next video, we are going to look at small scale sculpture, but in this video, I want to focus on cave paintings. Now, this is perhaps the most abundant visual material that we have from this time period. These are typically paintings that are found inside caves. Now, their location within the caves is very convenient and useful for us because this means that these images have been protected from the damage that being open to the air, the sun, the wind, and the rain can do for tens of thousands of years. Now, Paleolithic people may have made other paintings elsewhere, but they did not survive due to the elements. So these caves have been really a place to protect the paintings from environmental degradation and human vandalism. And that is something that art historians and archaeologists are really concerned with, which is why you can't go into Lascaux. We want to preserve these for the future. However fun it might be to go visit in person, we want to make sure that these are preserved for all of time so we can observe from afar without damaging the cave paintings. So let's look at some examples. Here we're looking at an image from Altamira in northern Spain. These cave paintings are dated to about 12,000 to 11,000 BCE, and it's hard to get a sense of the scale here, but each of these bisons depicted here is over 5 feet long. So these are really life-size depictions of these wild animals, perhaps animals that these people hunted, although scholars have looked at the bones of Paleolithic people, and it turns out while they did eat some protein, it was not a regular part of their everyday diet. They were also eating smaller animals, not just big game like bull, bison, horses, and other large animals, but also smaller animals were major sources of protein in the Paleolithic diet. So how were these paintings made? These paintings were no easy feat to execute. This was not something simple or easy to do. This took time. This took an investment of resources. These people are going into dark spaces. We have cave walls that have rough contours. And so painters had to be quite resourceful in order to gather materials to create these images. And remember, we're in a cave. So in order to combat that dark pitch black of a cave, they had to make lamps, probably using animal fat, to illuminate the space while the artists are using natural pigments such as ochre and mixing this with water to paint the images. Sometimes the black is coming from soot from a fire that has been put out, and artists are creating brushes using hairs from animal tails. There are some paintings where you can see spots or polka dots. Here we're looking at the spotted horses from Pechmerle in France. These are dated to about 22,000 BCE, and this horse again is life-size or larger than life. Here you can see these little polka dots. And it is believed that these spots or polka dots were made by shooting paint through a tube. Think of like a straw and spitting the pigment through the straw to create these polka dots or spots of paint. You will also see above the horse a handprint. And this print is in the negative. So the hand has been held up to the wall, and then someone has, probably again through a tube, sprayed pigment against the hand to leave the print on the wall. Now, we don't know exactly why these hands are depicted all over cave paintings, but we see them not just here, but at many caves, including the very famous Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of the Hands in Argentina, where there's an almost fervorish image of hands layered on top of each other, perhaps over a period of time. Some scholars think of these hands as a kind of signature, perhaps, for the artists who are creating these images. And in fact, recent studies based on an observation of the way the hands are depicted and based on the bones that have been found nearby to cave paintings indicate that in this study, at least 60% of the hands on the wall are the hands of women. We're not talking about gender, but we're talking about biological sex. Biological women appear to perhaps have been participating in the art making. So we don't have the same gendered norms about labor that Paleolithic people had. It appears that both men and women, or people of any gender, were participating in storytelling, image making, hunting, and gathering. So hunting wasn't something that only men did. It was something that if you were fit and able, you would participate regardless of your gender. So the amount of resources necessary, the time to collect the resources, and then the labor to create these images all points to this idea that these images are important. People were not simply bored. This is probably not just a doodle in a child's notebook, because this took a great deal of resources and time to create. So what is the significance of ancient cave paintings? We will see that these paintings are often on walls and ceilings, places that are hard to reach, but a really great place to catch the view from. So perhaps these were used in some kind of storytelling with visual imagery to accompany oral storytelling. What you will notice when you're looking at these images is that there isn't really a sense of the landscape. We do not yet have a ground line, a line that separates the sky from the earth. And so the artist's main concern here is with depicting the animals and in some cases their actions. So in some instances they appear to be running or sometimes running towards each other, fighting, and every once in a while, on rare instances, we will see what appears to be a depiction of a human interaction, perhaps a human hunt of these animals. So what is the significance? Well, the short of it is, we don't really know for sure because we have no written corroborating evidence. These might have been used in ancient storytelling, perhaps as people are huddled around the fire, maybe even participating in a communal meal where they're sharing the fruits of their labor. Perhaps they've had a successful hunt. Perhaps they've gathered some fruits and herbs and berries and things from the forest. Perhaps they're sitting around engaging in a communal meal and being told a story from a storyteller. Perhaps it's a story of the hunt, or perhaps these are depictions of what the people are to be thankful for. Perhaps there is a spiritual level to these. Many of the indigenous cultures around the world have an appreciation for and a connection to nature and a sense of gratitude to the animals for the sacrifice that they're giving nutrients to the people. So perhaps there is a spiritual level to this where they're praying or thanking the animals. Some scholars have speculated that these might be instructional, that the images might serve to tell people which animals have been found where and in what location, so that people can know which animals are moving through which areas at which time. But the long answer is that we don't really know. This is the truth. We don't know for sure. This is speculation based on the images that we see and based on other archaeological evidence found in and around the scene and from archaeological evidence across the Paleolithic era. Now, I want to close this video with looking at one of my favorite images. Here we're looking at a painting from the wall of Lascaux Cave in France. This image is dated to 15,000 to 13,000 BCE. Remember, also known as a long ass time ago. In this image, we see a woolly rhinoceros. So it looks like a rhinoceros, but it's got like sort of long hair. Fun fact, I looked it up. There was a woolly rhinoceros around France and Western Europe in the Paleolithic era. I had to look this up because I had never heard of a woolly rhinoceros. But here we are seeing a woolly rhinoceros and what appears to be a disemboweled bison. The bison has this large circular thing hanging out of its belly, which we believe to be its bowels. And the bison also has its head pointed down and its horns pointed directly toward what appears to be, but we're not certain, appears to be a man, a human, perhaps a wounded man who might be lying on the ground or caught in the crossfires. Perhaps the bison is chasing the rhinoceros and this human just got caught up amidst the stray bullets. It looks more to me though like a spear has been thrown at the bison, and this is why the bison has been disemboweled. I see a line moving through that looks like the bison has been pierced by perhaps this human's arrow. But then there's something really interesting next to the human, which kind of looks like, I don't know, a duck on a stick. I don't know, a duck on a stick. What could this be? Perhaps it is the staff of a shaman. I've had students in the past who were duck hunters, and they told me that they have decoy ducks that they use when they go hunting. So perhaps this is some kind of decoy that's used in hunting. Or perhaps this is just the fancy knob or top of some kind of stick or staff. But the answer always is, especially when we're talking about prehistoric art, we just don't know. So what do you think? What is happening in this image? Is this an image from the hunt? Are these animals fighting with each other? And what does this human have to do with anything? And as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the rare examples where we see what appears to be a human depicted in the cave paintings. So sound off. Let me know in the comments, what do you think is happening in this image with the rhinoceros and the disemboweled bison? And if you liked this video and you want to know more, stay tuned for the next 2 videos. In the next video, we will talk about depictions of the female body in prehistoric art. And in the following video, we will look at Neolithic architecture. So if you loved this, don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next in this series of ancient art on Art Trippin, the lecture series.